and a couple of new faces. Just before we proceed with the formal business of this board today, I just want to make a few brief remarks, as this is the first time that this board has met since the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Throughout her very remarkable life, Her Majesty the Queen displayed an exceptional commitment to West Yorkshire and its people. Her first visit as Queen was in 1953, and over successive years she's attended multiple engagements in our towns and villages and interacted a lot with businesses as well across West Yorkshire. On behalf of the board, I'd just like to pay our respects to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and send our deepest condolences to the royal family. Thank you. So, turning to our agenda today and item 1, Miles, could you confirm any apologies, please?
Apologies for absence have been received from Mayor Tracy Brabin, Professor Shirley Congdon, Councillor Richard Cooper, Councillor Denise Jeffrey, Councillor James Lewis, Mandy Ridyard, Tom Riordan, Councillor Tim Swift, Cully Thurai and Councillor Andrew Waller.
Thank you. That's a lot of apologies, I'm afraid. I know Mayor Brabin extends her large apologies as she is currently in India on a trade mission, and so we will hear more about that as part of the mayoral update later. Moving to item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest they wish to declare for any item on the agenda today? Andrew. Okay, thank you, Andrew. And Cameron, does that...
We're part of the winning bid, so I'm part of the consultant.
Thank you. Are there any... Susan?
I have. But I was told I need to declare.
We'll come to that. That's item 12, and we're going to talk about that item in a minute.
I need to declare that.
Thank you, Councillor Hinchcliffe. So item 3 on the agenda is the possible exclusion of the press and public. And linked to the point that Councillor Hinchcliffe has just made, officers have identified that item 12 on enterprise zones does contain exempt information. And as such, this committee is asked to agree to the exclusion of press and public during consideration of that agenda item 12 under Part 1, Section B, Paragraph 3 of the Leeds City Region Partnership Access to Information Annex. Now, I would naturally seek to hold the entirety of our meetings in public, but I have reviewed the information, and on this occasion I'm supportive of that. So if we agree that the press and public will be excluded to that item when we come to consider it, and therefore I would move any other business to before that so that we can sort of close the public part of the meeting and then hold that last remaining item in private. So are we content to agree that the recommendation that that information is exempt? Seeing nods, so we'll take that as passed. Thank you. Moving to item 4, the minutes for our meeting of the 15th of June, which was our annual general meeting. Are there any comments or any questions relating to those minutes? I'm not seeing any hands or heads, so are we content to confirm that those minutes are an accurate record of our discussions? I'm now seeing heads and thumbs up. Thank you. Thank you. So before we proceed to the formal business, just to remind people, if you are talking, if you could use your microphones and then turn them on after you've finished making your contribution, that would be great, because we are going to record and live stream this meeting, so it's important that everyone can hear. Okay, so we will move to item 5, which is governance arrangements, and I will hand over to Caroline Allen, who will give an update in relation to the process to recruit new private sector members to this board, including the new permanent chair of the LEP. That also includes the remuneration review for the new chair, as well as the revising of some governance arrangements. Once that has been concluded, Caroline and I will then pick up to talk about the other matter, which is the LEP Diversity Champion. So over to you, Caroline.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair, for that. Hopefully the report is fairly self-explanatory, so I shall be brief, but I'm very happy to take any questions on it. We're at a point at the moment where we've submitted the integration plan for the new arrangements for the LEP Board to government. We are awaiting a decision on that, or any comments and any feedback they may have. Not surprisingly, even if there wasn't going to be any delay before, we expect some delay now. We had expected it by the end of the month, but we've not had an indication as to when that'll be. So, in terms of the arrangements for the recruitment steps, it seems sensible to await that outcome so that we don't do any abortive work. But we are keen to progress that, obviously, over this autumn. And what we do know at this point, and what's been recognised by the board at previous meetings, is that there's going to be an evolutionary process for this board and how it sits with the new mayoral arrangements. And in fact, we're moving towards it being a business advisory board to the mayor, and hence the LEP chair being a mayor's appointment. That means that the constitutional arrangements and the detail we have there in terms of our recruitment procedures and the steps that we take will need to be flexed to reflect the move to a new process. So what this report is seeking is the approval of the LEP board for the LEP chief exec in consultation with the mayor to put the new arrangements in place to enable that recruitment process to commence and to feed back on that at the December LEP board. And that will be for the LEP chair, and I think as part of that it will be looking at the LEP board private sector members as well. Parallel with that is, of course, the issue of the remuneration for the LEP chair and what that should look like, that needs to reflect obviously the role profile and the function of that LEP chair going forward. So that is tied up in these wider discussions in terms of those proposals. So again, the proposal here for the board is that the arrangements for taking that forward and identifying the appropriate remuneration should be done outside the meet, but by the chief executive in consultation with the mayor, and then an update reported back to the LEP board meeting in December. So they're the two proposals. It's being transparent to say actually the arrangements we've had to date in terms of that recruitment process no longer fits, but we're in a model, we're sort of at that transitional stage of we need to actually keep that moving before we look to what the new constitutional arrangements would be for this board. I'd expect them to be for them to be proportionate. We would look to streamline the arrangements and bring them more consistently in with the CA arrangements, assuming that we will have the flexibility to do that under the new arrangements with government. So I shall pause there because obviously I'm happy to take any questions on those 2 points, but they are the recommendations 10.1 to 10.3 at the end of the paper. Thanks.
Thank you, Caroline. And just before I open for any questions or comments on that, I just wanted to invite Ben as Chief Executive just to potentially provide a further update.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. It's really just to add to Caroline's comments that the points about passing it to myself in consultation with the Mayor are about expediency, given the timings of the LEP board meetings. And as you would expect from me, I'm not just going to make any changes and then tell you what they are. We'll do this through a period of kind of email consultation and engagement as necessary. So you'll be fully involved in any proposed changes that we'd like to make to the Constitution.
Thank you, Ben. So the direct ask is that we note the update and we're happy to approve the recommendation that our LEP Chief Executive, in consultation with the Mayor before our next board meeting on the 1st of December, can make those arrangements. Is everyone happy to agree that? Super. So the second item in this paper is around our appointment of our diversity champion, and obviously this is something that is a shared priority for all of us, but I think it is important for us as a board to have a champion. We were unable at the last meeting at our AGM to fill that from existing private sector members on the board. So as part of the update, we sought expressions of interest from the wider private sector member group. We had 5 really great applications and expressions of interest. Shortlisted those and have held interviews in between when these papers were published and this meeting itself. And so I am pleased to be able to provide a verbal update to the board with a recommendation on our proposed new diversity champion who would be co-opted to this board for the length of time that I remain in as interim chair, and then we can review as part of the wider governance arrangements. The person that we are proposing to the board is Asma Ikmal. For those that don't know Asma, she joined the Beak panel earlier this year in June. She's an insolvency lawyer by trade. She's the only female and BAME equity partner out of 15 equity partners at the firm where she practices. She's a member of West North York's Chamber, the BAME Committee, and also YABA. She represented Asim Rafiq, the ex-professional cricketer, against institutional racism as a very public case. And she's a business member for the New Dawn initiative in Bradford, helping refugees start businesses. And in that interview process, there was myself and Alan, and I think we were both very impressed by all candidates, but in particular Asma. So that is my proposal for the board, if we are willing to accept that recommendation. Great. Sorry, Councillor. Oh, you are, yes. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so given diary commitments of Councillor Pandor, as Mayor Braben is away in India right now, we have asked Councillor Pandor to lead the mayoral update. He's going to need to leave sooner than this meeting finishes, so we're going to bring forward item 8 of the agenda, the mayoral update, to now. So Councillor Pandor, if I can pass to you.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for the bringing forward this item. My cabinet meeting was originally yesterday, but because of the council's constitution, the meeting's been pushed back for today, and we've got a very heavy agenda, and we've got to make some decisions. So hence, my apologies. So I'll have to leave about 3 o'clock. I'm stepping up for Tracy. As you know, Tracy is in India. Hence she can't be here today. She's on a trade mission to make sure that we actually do carry on the good work of the Combined Authority and the LEP. The event's been supported by the Department for International Trade, British High Commissioner, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner, and she's going to be meeting some key companies, female entrepreneurs. And one of the key events that she's going to be attending is the high-profile address to the Global FICCI Frames Convention, hosted in Mumbai. And I'm being told that this is one of the Asia's biggest entertainment conferences. So that'll really put West Yorkshire on the map. The purpose is to promote West Yorkshire to international audiences and develop relations to attract inward investment, increase awareness of our region, to create our cultural strengths and build relationships with Indian business and groups. And on the back of the free trade agreement, I think it's a massive opportunity that we need to actually exploit. I'm sure that there'll be further trade missions that will be going to India, and within the current climate, I think there's a massive opportunity there to actually carry on that good work on the back of Tracy's visit. The other thing that she wants me to just update you on is the buses update. You're probably aware that Mayor Braben's been spearheading the Mayor's Fairs, and you've probably seen a lot of profile on social media and the local press. Fares are now capped at £2, and the MetroCard Day Saver ticket has been launched, which will enable people to make unlimited journeys across the region. The fare has been reduced from £4.50 to from £5.50 to £4.50, and it'll save, on average, each user around £500, so that's a great contribution. But one of the things that we are all disappointed about, and we had a conversation with other leaders, is the business bus recovery grant that we managed to fight, was to make sure that buses continue and the operations continue. But what's happened is a lot of the operators have actually cut back, and that's actually having a massive impact on the users of the buses. And as local leaders, we're actually getting a lot of criticisms, and we will continue to actually air our frustrations to government to make sure that we do actually start to invest in public transport. I can't downplay the anger that was felt as the leaders, but it's something that we will continue to press on. We have a new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. I don't know if anybody had a bet on who would get in, but I know where my bet was, and if I was a betting man, I'd be a very rich man. but I'm not. Anyway, Mayor Braben has written to Prime Minister and Cabinet members, and I'm sure you know that Simon Clarke is our Minister for Levelling Up, and Simon Clarke was the one who actually came to meet us before the Mayoral Combined Authority was formed, and I think he was a decent guy. You know, he listened, and we managed to get a good deal compared to the other Mayoral Combined Authorities. So I'm hoping that he continues to listen. And I found him a decent man, and he does know our combined authority quite well, because that was one of his success stories in his last ministerial role, and will continue to work with us. There's also the Northern Powerhouse Rail pledge that we're asking the government to honour. Their party's pledge to level up the north. That'll be interesting, because it's something that we've been banging on about for years, and we hope that Liz Truss carries on looking at that. And they need to take immediate action on the cost of living crisis, which is the next item that I've been asked to just update you on. There's going to be some announcements today and Friday, and there's already been some announcements and some noise that's been made in terms of household support, business support. And what worries me is public services, local government, probably will not benefit as much as we would like. I know Mayor Braben is actually fully behind making sure that household, business and local government, public services and the police authority get their fair share of funding, because millions are struggling to make ends meet. And I was at a conference earlier on, and one of the things I said was that we had 10 years of austerity, and then we just managed to come out of that, and then we had the pandemic, and we thought, God, things can't get any worse, and now we've got the cost of living crisis, and Tracy had all these pledges, and you know, she's trying her best, but each time we actually try and get a strategy in place, the goalposts change. So Tracy is still committed to making sure that, you know, we address the pledges that she put forward, but at the same time we've got a difficult juggling act with all the cost of living crisis. So we'll keep updated. If I've missed anything, Ben, I'm sure you'll correct me. I think I've covered everything that Tracy wanted me to.
You missed anything?
Right, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor and Ben, for the affirmation. Are there any questions on that update that anyone would like to raise? And if not, we shall move on to, I think, the very, very meaty and substantive topical part of our agenda on the economic update. Okay, so moving to item 6. I think, as Councillor Pandor just said, it's a huge couple of weeks for announcements on the economy. You know, as the cost of living and doing business crisis deepens, we've had the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, last week talking about the headline inflation measure. Well, whilst it's dropped a little to 9.8%, it's still nearing a 40-year high. The government's announcement this morning, which I think is positive news to businesses, about the wholesale price sort of being supported at about half the anticipated market rate, yet that certainty for the next 6 months with a review in 3. We've got the MPC due to come tomorrow for the Bank of England base rate, and an emergency budget this Friday. And so today in this item, we've got some time to hear from Patrick Bowes to, I think, do 2 things. Firstly, to talk about some macro drivers that we're having, seeing both households and businesses squeezed, and Patrick will help us sort of talk through I think a very interesting visualization of what's going on right now to simplify it in a slightly different way to what we've done in previous LEP Board updates. And then also provide some specific insights into West Yorkshire, as not all regions and not all sectors within regions are equal for this. And I think we have an opportunity to discuss this as a board, and as we do, I think our response needs to be considered with what are the things that we can control locally. You know, local authorities and combined authorities, we're focusing on what's in our gift, our sphere of control today. And there's business support programs that we can offer that we will talk about to enhance or continue, and I think we can do those locally. Then there's the things that we can influence, and in particular being clear on what our asks and requests are of government at this time to provide further support for businesses. And I think before I just hand to Patrick, I just want to say that there's a close link to the next agenda item, which is around our economic strategy. I think this is our sort of short term, how do we help businesses through these, going to be very difficult few months and possibly years. And then longer term, in the next item, what is our economic vision and our economic strategy for perhaps 2030, maybe beyond. So Patrick, if I may, over to you with that intro.
Quick question, you might ask how many economists, does it take to design an infographic? And actually it's remarkably few, because the design inspiration for this infographic came from our own LEP chair, so we are following in his coattails, so I hope we do him a good job. I think it's a good way of visually representing some of the key facts and figures that are in the board economic update. I won't dwell too much on the detail of it, because I know we're keen to focus on some of the key questions and what we might do in response. And so as well, when we come to that point as well, we have a series of questions I think we'd like to pose to you and get your feedback on. Phil Wycherley will also help me in that session as well. So basically, just to sort of step through the infographic, sort of Mark very helpfully mentioned there that we do have new inflation figures. Inflation fell back a touch, but I think the view is the underlying trend is that CPI is likely to increase. And why is that? Well, we know that when you break down consumer price inflation, if you look at the different component parts of it, the main reason why inflation came down was to do with falling petrol and diesel prices. Underlying that, if you look at other things such as food costs, energy prices, they're all rising. So, for instance, food inflation rose by 13.1% in the year to August. That was up from 12.7% in the year to July. And that's the same is true with energy costs and electricity costs. Electricity costs, I think, we're up by 95% in the year. So the underlying trend is most forecasters are expecting CPI inflation to go back up. Obviously, mentioned there, whilst in diesel and petrol costs have fallen back a bit, they're still high over the last year. Another thing to mention is rents, private sector rents, for instance, are also up. They're up by 5% in the year. So also some evidence in the housing market that sort of headline sort of sale costs are trimming back a bit. Actually, private sector rents are increasing quite strongly. The other part of this is obviously from the business perspective. So obviously we have a lack of labour. We've got a reasonably strong jobs market at the moment, but there's some clear evidence now that the jobs market is beginning to soften. And I think one of the sort of reasons for that part of the infographic is we've got some clear information, I think, from the LCR business survey, which is now primarily focused on West Yorkshire businesses. That many businesses are finding it hard to recruit, hard to reach skills. So for instance, so there does appear to be a sort of a vacancy issue around how to recruit skills. The other thing to remember as well is that in the backdrop, the currency is not been doing too well. So where we were a year ago, the pound was trading about 138 to the dollar. It's now at 114. That exacerbates some of our cost pressures, particularly for businesses. Wage increases. Well, we know more generally from ONS that general salary costs are running up between 5 and 7%. We know from our own survey work, which is included in the LEP Board pack, where we print some details from the latest LCR business survey, that many businesses are also saying that they're facing significant cost increases. So many businesses, I think the majority of businesses are expecting to increase their wage bill this year. Only about 30% of businesses are not expecting to increase their wage bill. The remainder of businesses are expecting to increase their wage bill. And they're expecting increases of anywhere between 5 and 10%. The other thing to mention is producer inflation. Input inflation is substantial. Those are the official figures on producer price inflation at 20.5% there. We also know from the LCR business survey, when we've asked businesses to tell us about what they think is going to happen in the next year, that they will find themselves rather unfortunate in a situation where they're going to have to pass on those cost increases. So of the 1,000 businesses we talked, 69% of them actually said to us they will have to pass on those cost increases. And those cost increases tend to range from anywhere between 5 and 10%. So really mirroring, I think, what we're seeing in terms of general sort of CPI inflation. So really that's just to give a bit of background rather than walking through all the LEP Board reports. So in terms of, what do we know? What can we do? Next steps? What can we influence? it's worth maybe just touching on one or two sort of really interesting insights that we sort of flagged up in the combined authority paper on cost of living, which I think are relevant here and actually shape the discussion. We know through the REBIS, the Combined Authorities Resource Efficiency Fund, has seen a 50% increase in approved grant applications for energy efficiency just in the first 8 months of 2022 compared to the same period in 2021. So you can see where businesses can access that support. They're really focusing in on those issues. For the first time since the launch of the Growth Service in 2015, the number one source of inquiries to the Business Gateway team was for REBIS. So again, a real theme there. In terms of what does it mean for us in terms of next steps? Obviously, we do have some in the REBIS scheme will be fully committed by October 22, which will leave a potential gap for new applicants until our new £10.6 million business sustainability programme kicks in from April. Obviously, it's fair to say that the Combined Authority is looking at urgent ways that we bridge that gap, but obviously it'd be interesting to get some feedback today from LEP Board members. The new business sustainability programme is designed to provide a more holistic package of support, and it does actually give us the opportunity to look at all sectors. As you know, with many current schemes that we've got, particularly where they've got European funding, we are limited, I think, with which sectors we can target that. And obviously, we won't have that limitation with a new business sustainability programme, given the source of funding for that, particularly with the use of gain share. Fair to say, and colleagues in sort of our innovation team are keen for me to sort of emphasise this, every crisis breeds innovation because it obviously allows businesses to develop. Obviously, we're in an exceptional set of circumstances. You know, the nature of the market failure we're experiencing at the moment is probably not the typical kind of challenge that your average business would face. But it's fair to say that recognising that backdrop, we do have a number of tools at our disposal, particularly the Combined Authorities Innovative Entrepreneurs Programme, the Merrill Innovation Prize, Connecting Innovation, the Digital Enterprise and Made Smarter, and the new Business Productivity Programme, which I know Phil will touch on because he knows a lot more about this in more detail in terms of what we're doing in terms of designing that. As you know, and we made reference there, government has made an announcement this morning to support for businesses. Obviously, businesses to date have not had any support. They've not benefited from the price cap. And obviously, we're still studying the detail of that. It looks like this morning the way the government's approach this is they set a certain strike rate for gas and electricity in terms of usage and megawatt hours. It does allow for businesses on fixed contracts and variable contracts to apply. It seems to be easier for businesses that are on fixed contracts to tap into the support. Those on variable contracts seems to be a little bit more complicated, although we're still looking into the detail of that. One thing to note is that we do know we've got a number of very high energy use businesses in West Yorkshire. So we've got around about 665, 670 very high energy intensive businesses. And we know that from our own research. So it's interesting as well to get views as to, potentially what, we'll touch on some of what we know, some of the detail around the energy support package, what that might mean in terms of next steps and how we can fill some of the gaps. Because obviously, as you know, the announcement is only for 6 months. And obviously, we have an opportunity to potentially lobby for longer term support. But again, the devil's in the detail as to what that scheme means for different industries, and we still don't know enough about that. So the potential questions I think that we would like to pose, I'm going to try and segue into the technology works here, are around. Bear with me a sec. So I'll bring this up.
Patrick, and just as you're finding that, I'm conscious there's a lot of information for board members to take in the papers in that update as well. I'm conscious we have our representative from our business rep groups, Becky, and I certainly wouldn't want to put you on the spot, but imagine this is something quite close to your heart, Becky, and would invite your contribution now if that might.
Well, timing is everything. Sorry. Timing is everything. We've just had our regional council this morning where we heard from a wide range of businesses in the room. It was the number one topic of conversation. I think what we're really keen to understand is firstly the percentage increases that some businesses are experiencing. It is different sector by sector. You're looking at 250% for manufacturing businesses, obviously less than that where you're sort of office based. I think the worry is when it is reviewed in 3 months' time, there will be a lot of businesses that are not going to be entitled to support going on for longer than the 6 months, so sort of April onwards. So what we're really keen to get, and I think from a LEP perspective, from our perspective, the Chambers FSB, we're really keen that businesses share with us you know, what their actual figures are, and then we're able to sort of collate that. So I mean, just an example of one business I spoke to last week, UK Greetings, are based in Dewsbury. Their electricity bill's gone up 250%. They are already reshoring as much as they possibly can to try and make themselves more self-sufficient, but you know, the cost of actually doing business is stopping them from doing more of that investment. A lot of businesses have already gone down the route of starting to look at energy efficiency. But again, it's that sort of, do we stop doing that now and concentrate on pouring all of our spare money into paying our electricity and energy bills, or do we carry on that route? And I think that's a sort of really troubling position for sort of businesses to try and work through at the moment. What I will be able to do is, once I've collated some of that detail, as I say, just we haven't had it this morning, I can share some of that absolute, you know, insight as such, really.
Thank you, Becky. That's hugely helpful insight. I wonder if I just, before I come to your questions, Patrick, I could just pause and just allow a couple of the board members in for initial observations or questions on the data. So I'll go Simon first, if I may, and then Andrew, and then Annie.
Thank you. So this is a question, I guess, directed partly towards Patrick and partly towards you, Becky. It may not be one that can be directly answered at the moment because we don't have the depth of detail or data on there, but I was rather struck by the 6 months but reviewed at 3. Is the sense that a lot of businesses will just plan to 3, and you know, are we concerned that that is insufficient stability for many organisations to make the types of decisions that they have the confidence to keep the doors open, to be kind of figurative about it? Just wondered if that is a concern that's shared by others.
Thank you, Simon. And I'm just going to actually ask if Andrew comes in now, and then Anna, and then we can sort of talk about that, because I think we will all have opinions on that very important question.
Yeah, I just wanted, I suppose, as the token manufacturer in the room, as it were, to echo everything Becky said about the seriousness of the situation, and maybe just to bring it alive for people in our business. I guess we'd be one of the 670 high energy in the textiles area, particularly in the dyeing industry, very energy intensive. The cost of our energy bills has always been roughly the same as the amount of profit that we're making every year. So if you consider now that energy prices are going up, well, I think you said 95%, and looking like they'll probably in the second 3 months be doing quite a bit more than that, it gives you just a feeling for the existential nature of the threat that this poses. And also then just to build on Simon's point about how far can we look ahead, I'm sure we're all feeling in our industry a little bit rabbit in the headlights, like let's just get through it. But I've got a serious concern that we're going to be in the same position this time next year. I mean, you know, it's a brave person who can see the end of this, isn't it? So I would really encourage us, as we do thinking, to, yes, get through the next 3 months, but also have some really serious thinking about what will be required if it does go on for 2, maybe 3 years.
Thank you, Andrew. I entirely agree with your perspective there. Amir, and then we'll sort of pause, and maybe Patrick, if you could then sort of summarise some of the sort of helpful discussion thoughts that you thought would be good from that. So, Amit.
Yeah, just following on from, I think, some of the conversations around the sectors. I recall when we were doing when we were looking at this around COVID, and you'd produced some really helpful insights into different sectors and sort of some simulations around which sectors and which places were likely to be most affected. And I just wondered, given the amount of sort of business sectoral information that we can get access to, is it possible to identify which sectors are likely to be most affected, but then where are they located, and then what's the impact going to be on those areas? And if we are going to take a sectoral approach to, one, applying innovation into the areas where we think it's going to have the biggest return and the best sort of response for the money, but also given the fact that I think this is going to be here for 3 years as a minimum. I've got an energy-related business, and that's the sort of timescales we're looking at. And based on that, should we be sort of sort of taking a decision really around which sectors do we support and try and really help to accelerate into a more efficient and technologically advanced position, and which ones do we think are not capable of doing that.
Thank you, Amir. Patrick, I just wonder if you wanted to just respond sort of quickly to those and then sort of help us with those discussion points.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, we do have forecasts. So we do have economists have this term called econometric, and it's a way we gaze at what we think is going to happen to the economy based upon past performance and the structure of and we keep those forecasts updated on a regular basis, and we included some of that information in the CA paper, the headline information. So we got really good information down to some quite fine sectoral detail about what we think, based on a current set of macroeconomic assumptions. If we assume all of those will continue for 2 or 3 years, and then you assume the economy improves, we do have some information we can share and do more work on that gives an idea as to which sectors will be hit hardest and which sectors will recover more quickly, and also which areas will recover more quickly. And some areas will recover more quickly because they might have more of certain industries in terms of footprint and presence, and that might be more resilient. So we can certainly answer that question. That's for sure. I think in terms of the earlier points on 3 months, it's sort of Alan sort of helpfully reminded me there is that it's going to be reviewed after 3 months, and I think the indication from government is that they do intend to actually then not just to reflect in 3 months, it might well then shape up potentially a package of support going from beyond that. So I think it's important we keep our foot on the gas in terms of lobbying for a longer term solution here. And I think the point is extremely well made by Andrew. Some of our larger businesses, and you'll probably correct me if I'm wrong here, tend to negotiate their energy over quite long periods. And you know, so you know, it'd be interesting to see how the commitment to that support fits in with the kind of requirement, you know, for a large business to plan their energy over a 2 or 3 year period. So hopefully that's a helpful response to those questions.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Just inviting any other people to come to summarise, you know, my take from that so far. You know, firstly, we can't underestimate the magnitude of this impact on businesses, and we need to take it really seriously. I think secondly, we should be alive to the fact that different sectors and different businesses within sectors are going to have very different outcomes from this, and I think a sector view and a sector approach is very useful. Thirdly, whilst the government support is useful as a welcome measure in the short term, I think we need to be aware that this could be something that we are facing for a lot longer than 6 months. And to pick up on the anxiousness that Becky and Andrew raised, I think they are the 3 big takeaways from me from this conversation so far. Would anyone else like to sort of jump in at this moment, or I will? Great. Councillor Lynn first.
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks for that presentation. I thought that was great. I suppose from our point of view here in Calderdale, we're kind of like really chuffed about the fact that there has been this big increase in the take-up and approvals for the ReBiz programme, because a lot of this has to be about how we support our businesses to become much more energy efficient and so on. And I guess it's a matter of concern. It would be a matter of concern to us that there is likely, if you've finished, if the money runs out in next month and there's a gap, then I think that's something to be regretted. And I would certainly urge that everything that can be done is done to try to bridge that gap, because we'd certainly welcome that. I think the other thing I would just mention, which hasn't really been mentioned so far in the discussion, is that we've got some real concerns, as I'm sure many people have around this table, about the impact on the ordinary consumer, which is our ordinary residents, because the less money they've got to spend, the more that's going to impact on the performance of our businesses. We've got a really big event happening tomorrow with over 200 people coming along to look at the cost of living stuff in Calderdale. And we're very, very conscious of the fact that many of the people that are delivering frontline support, trying to maximise the amount of benefits that people might get, how they might be able to then spend that money in local businesses, those self-same organisations, many of them, are up against the cliff edge of the ending of European funding, and we're really, really worried about that. So I just think that it's really important that we remember that when we saw that infographic, and the bottom bit was about businesses, but the top bit was about, you know, the impact on consumers, and it's not just about you know, the poverty issue, it's about what's the impact on that going to be in terms of the purchasing power of people in our region. That's my first comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Gazlan. And just to respond, I think you know, we're going to come and talk a little bit more about some of the initiatives such as Rebiz and the things that we can do within our influence. So that point is very noted. I understand. I think they're going to the Combined Authority on the 21st of October at the next meeting for active conversation. And I think your point on households also very accurate, as that reduces discretionary spending, which has an impact also on sectors that rely on discretionary spending. So thank you. Councillor Morley.
Yeah, similar as well. It's the concern on hospitality across the region. As someone whose family runs a small business in hospitality outside of West Yorkshire, my partner works in a major pub franchising place. It's interesting the conversation we've been having over the last few weeks as the cost of living crisis started in, that actually people are still using our premises. They're still going out there. So it's interesting the fact that we're, you know, the consumers are still using hospitality, where you think in reality that would be the first place that would start tightening their spending. So it'll be interesting actually how that's going to hit over the next 12 months. I don't think it is there with people yet. I think once we get the Christmas period out of the way, coming to January, I think that will probably start hitting a lot more home. But it is a concern how that's going to return. But I don't see that happening through my own personal experience of being in that business. That's coming to fruition at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. And Becky, you might want to come in on that point.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we had an update from Asda this morning. You'll be aware that they brought out their essentials range, I think in May. It now constitutes over 50% of the basket completely, and 9 out of 10 people have got one of that range in their basket. And they said that so I wonder if it's manifested itself there first. The other person in the room was Freeman Grattans, and she was saying that the things that are being purchased through their stores are all things like blankets, hot water bottles, slippers. So I wonder if that's where it's being manifested at the moment, and not in, you know, people still feel the need that they actually like to spend the spare money on going out.
Thank you, Becca. That's very helpful insight. Simon, and then we'll Simon Allen, and then we'll pass back to Patrick.
Great. So really on the theme of, you know, indirect impacts rather than direct impacts, and you know, I was struck earlier about the comment about net zero and people's ambitions to, you know, reduce their energy demand, and clearly that's a vital part of the drive towards net zero and our strategy to address the climate emergency. But exactly where that tipping point is in terms of the need to address the here and now of energy prices versus invest in a short, medium or longer term energy efficient future for organisations, all different types. Again, I think there's a parallel there, isn't there, in terms of discretionary spend on a household level as to the way in which spend is allocated on a business level. I do wonder whether or not we'll the length of this crisis will determine where that balance point actually is.
Thank you, Simon. I agree. I think that's a very interrelated, important point. Alan.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide a bit more detail for the board, in case not everybody's seen it, about what the government has said today about what the review means after 3 months, because I think it's important for us to consider that when thinking about what support the LEP and the CA might provide over the next 6 months, and also what the position is in terms of influencing government for what future interventions they might put in place. So it talks about they'll review the operation in 3 months' time in order to inform what happens at the end of March. But the implication in here is that they will be moving away from universal support, which is what they've announced today, and instead much more targeted support, particularly towards businesses who are more vulnerable, so or have are less able to reduce their energy costs, and they are saying that they will want to look at how they can, the extent to which the scheme has been effective at supporting vulnerable non-domestic customers, which groups remain particularly vulnerable to energy price rises, taking into account wider cost pressures in the economy and what's happened to the price of energy over the period, and thirdly, how that support might continue. But there's a really important line here, which is right at the bottom of the statement, which says it's important that users who are less vulnerable to energy price increases, particularly larger business that are not energy intensive, use the 6-month support provided by the scheme to identify measures that they can take to protect themselves against high energy prices. So the implication of that is that the government is going to move away from universal support towards more targeted support, and that there is an onus on businesses who have the capability of doing so to start to attempt to reduce energy costs or otherwise become more energy efficient. And I think that's a really important point for how we consider what support we put in place over the next few months.
Thank you very much, Alan, for highlighting that. That's very helpful, and it does, and reconfirms the importance of programmes such as Rebiz, also such as some of the work on the supply chain that we can help to bring that supply chain a little bit more local as well. So Simon, to bring you in again.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually just a question to Alan, just for a bit more. Is your interpretation of that then, having read it? I know clearly you're not claiming expertise on it, but having read it, does that feel like a short grace period before the government ceases to help those that aren't helping themselves, or is there an implication or an undercurrent there that you're reading into it? Because that's kind of what it sounded like to me.
Well, that's the implication, but it could well be expectation management as well. It's an attempt to drive a particular behaviour. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's a lot of sort of context on where we are. We then have the choices to make on how we can continue to do things at a combined authority level, the things that are control, and also the things on influence. And Patrick, I noticed from your questions, naturally, I think the board has sort of gravitated to some of these anyway, so I'm conscious we might not want to duplicate, but I'd like us to also consider some of our existing initiatives and how potentially we can start looking at how we progress those. So can I pass back to you to conclude that?
Yes.
Sorry, Patrick, could you just pop your microphone on, please?
Sorry about that. I'll bring in my colleague Phil, because we have done some work mapping our existing sort of interventions and our sort of policy areas as well, and Phil hopefully will be able to sort of talk through that. So very, very quickly to run through these questions. They're on screen. I think actually they're still relevant in terms of what we learned this morning. So does the proposed equivalent support on business prices help, given the limited details we have? What more support is needed, and what we need to do to target help at sectors in greatest need? So I think that question is probably just as relevant, if not more relevant, based upon the sort of the insights that Anne was able to give there in terms of that of that undercurrent there in terms of the guidance from government. What should our ask be of government to support the development and deployment of highly innovative technology? So there's obviously a short-term set of issues that the LEP Board needs to give consideration to, but also there are the medium and longer-term sort of considerations, and I know Phil will touch on some of those issues as well. So around what we should be doing on deployment of highly innovative technologies, particularly in terms of supporting our carbon ambitions. Should we be lobbying for increased energy efficiency measures by ramping up energy efficiency grants at the national level? There's obviously a certain amount we can do at local level, but obviously this needs national support. And a couple of other sort of themes to the questions. Should we be asking government to accelerate the decoupling of gas from electricity prices to enable consumers to benefit fully from cheap domestic low carbon generation? So in this respect, for instance, the Bayes Energy Markets consultation is one means by which we can do that. But also does the LEP Board want to consider how we want to input to the review commission by the Prime Minister, led by Chris Skidmore, looking at our net zero commitments. And then these are just questions that loosely structure the discussion. And then LEP Board views about how businesses have started to respond to the tougher economic climate more generally as well. Sorry, I'm getting prompts on because so that really is just to sort of hopefully structure the conversation. What I'd like to do as well, we produced some sort of graphics which helps, I think, structure. So if you bear with me a sec, and that's an opportunity to bring in my colleague Phil here. Right, so we have prepared a number of graphics here. Sorry about the lurid colours, and then hopefully Phil can, and I'll operate here. We've got a number of slides to talk through. So Phil, over to you.
I think what we've got with these kind of concentric circle slides, which I'll try and I think what we've got here with these concentric circle slides is a visual, which is intended to demonstrate kind of the inner circle of things we have full control over as either kind of a combined authority or local authorities to kind of do ourselves and get on with and decide how we organise our own resources or our devolved expenditure, and also kind of wider things we might want to be pushing for, and that's either as a kind of a coalition of the combined authority and local authorities, or together hopefully with the private sector and the public sector in the region. And I think just a couple of kind of observations from the conversation so far. I think when Andrew was talking about, when he mentioned the point around we don't know how long this is going to be, I think that uncertainty and that impact of that uncertainty on business owners, on individuals, on people, is a really, really important issue. We're focusing on the cost and the spike in costs now, but that long-term impact on uncertainty is affecting all your planning decisions and what you're doing. And I think that we need to think about that in our response, because in these circles we don't have the level of resource that government have to do that kind of quick fix, if you like, which obviously is addressing some of that volatility now. I don't think the government's, obviously for the point Alan's alluded to, has the resources to do that forever, which is partly why they're managing expectations. And we have a bit more control on some of the more kind of strategic measures about getting people in the right place for the long term. So what we've done on these two concentric circle slides is list some of the things we're doing already, and some of the things we're thinking about doing in the future. So on this inner circle, we're looking, it's broadly what we were planning anyway, I think, as part of our business resilience package. And we've come and spoken to some of you about that before, and those of you that are involved in the Place and Environment Committee will know more detail about that. And I think the thing we want to probably have a discussion around in terms of business support today is where we, and thank you for Councillor Lynn for kind of prompting this, because I think this is a discussion you were trying to raise when you raised your question. What can we do kind of to ramp that up? What can we do to do that more quickly? So some of the things we're thinking about is clearly the ReBiz support, which has been very successful and is oversubscribed, is because it's based on and uses European funding, is only currently available to businesses that operate in a business-to-business environment. So won't support those businesses that operate in a business-to-consumer environment. So we have got plans to kind of extend that and widen that, but we need to make sure there is a minimal gap in doing that, and we might need to make sure that we provide some more quick base support that we can get out of the door, potentially to smaller businesses, more quickly over the immediate period, and do things really, really flexibly. A bit like I think what we did around the digital grants with COVID. We might explore a similar scheme to that. But these things are, I think where we're thinking as officers, it'd be useful to have views, is we're thinking about things that are helping businesses prepare themselves for the long term rather than paying energy bills, because that's what the government's announcement's for. That's broadly the focus at the moment in terms of what we might provide in terms of interventions, but interested in views on that in terms of the business side. I think there's a wider conversation, really interested in Becky's views and others' views about kind of what businesses and what your businesses are hearing, seeing on the ground in terms of how we get an authentic West Yorkshire voice to central government as they review this over 3 months, because they've rolled this out to get it out the door quickly, blatantly, but there'll be nuances within sectors, there'll be nuances within our region, and we're really keen to kind of have that dialogue with you over this period to understand how we adapt and shape our support. I'll stop there because I think it's important that you provide your views and comments on that.
Thank you, Phil. And so I'm also conscious that we could debate these incredibly important issues for days and longer than the time we have available in this meeting, but I would certainly seek, board members' input and these questions that both Patrick and sort of Phil has raised now initially for the next sort of 5 to 10 minutes. And if we need to then have a separate working session to do that, I would welcome that. Just so board members are aware, we then have a business reps group meeting with the Mayor, where I think the economic update and strategy will be a big feature on the 13th of October. And then we have our combined authority meeting on the 21st of October, where we'll be discussing this and hopefully being able to be fleet of foot and allocate funding to extend some of the schemes, Phil, that you mentioned. So if we need to have a call in between there, I will endeavour to facilitate one, but that's a timeline for sort of how we can do. I'll now open up, and Councillor Hinchcliffe, if I can come to you first, please, and then Simon again.
Thank you. I sort of agree, I suppose, that our place and our role in this is really to support companies to adapt as quickly as possible, because that will be money they won't have set aside to do it. All the expertise as well. I think some of it is finding the right people to do some of this stuff. People can get caught out getting the wrong providers, so anything we can do to guide people in the right direction. And I think going back to what Becky said as well was very about manufacturing. We're a much higher manufacturing base in West Yorkshire than other regions, and therefore I would suggest, manufacturing and supporting businesses to adapt, if you like, to this new economic climate as quickly as possible should be a focus of the combined authority, given our demography from a business perspective.
Thank you, Susan. I'll actually come to Amir first, and then Simon.
I was looking. Thanks. I was reading the things about the West Yorkshire Plan, and I did think that, and also going to the point that you mentioned about how we present something maybe more distinctively to government, and I mean, for me, as I look at this region, we've got such extreme nuances between sort of places that are successful and places that are not. It's, and that's even within the local towns and the local areas. So it's not sort of one sort of monochrome picture, and I do wonder whether a 20-minute neighbourhood approach is a powerful way to start to layer what's happening in a series of layers around each of the areas. And so we're breaking down areas, so we've almost got a benchmarking understanding of the whole area. And where there's concentrations of certain things that don't need help, they can be sort of, hopefully they can be less focus can be put there, and where it's needed most, it can be targeted there. But then I was also, so I'm very conscious of the amount of institutional capital that is looking for deployment into schemes and into cities and businesses and places. And the amount of that is for sustainable uses. I mean, I can't remember the exact figure, but it's literally in the billions. I mean, it's a massive figure. And I wonder to what extent we should be really exploring things like green bonds for local areas, for local places, maybe where there are certain concentrations, maybe that's going to pay for a district heat system or something like that, or a district central energy centre, or there's things that we can do that responds to these things, that uses that capital. But essentially we've got to create the framework within which that investment can find an avenue into those areas. And if we can then demonstrate how that works from an ESG perspective, because we're helping the most deprived and challenged places, and do it in a way that is uplifting them and giving a good reason for that investment to be invested here, I think that could be a really powerful thing. But I just think that there's a few sort of accumulated things there that I think need a more holistic kind of approach to try and approach it.
Thank you. Some interesting ideas there, Simon.
So I was going to come to your questions, actually, Patrick, at least a couple of them. And the one that really stood out to me first was question 3. Should we be lobbying for increased energy efficiency measures for ramping up? Yes, obviously we should. I mean, part of what makes me really cross about some of the narrative that sits behind this is that whilst the lack of energy efficiency measures hasn't caused the price spike, what it has caused is the severity of the impacts in many places. And I've been around this and similar tables for 8 or 9 years, as is Councillor Hinchcliffe, and you'll remember, like I do, this agenda has been on, that issue has been on the agenda for every year, certainly, not necessarily every meeting. And the ability to increase the energy efficiency of residential properties, small businesses and so on, there's no technological leap there. What there is a need for certainty in terms of funding so that people can develop the skills, develop the supply chain, and develop the rollout program to actually get this done. And if we look at the relative impact of the price spikes across Europe and then map that against the amount of energy loss or heat loss from properties on average, we are an outlier in the wrong way, and it's because of what we haven't done in the past. We've actively chosen not to do it as governmentally, not regionally. And so there's been an active and deliberate choice not to insulate our homes. And by making that choice, we have a much more severe issue now to address. We could very easily and cheaply have designed a lot of that impact out. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So it does make me quite cross, really. And so the obvious answer to that is, yes, we should. Answer to 4, yes, we should. It makes absolutely no sense. It's an economic skew, and it's essentially basing the price of renewables against fossil fuel, which really doesn't make any sense at all. So particularly as we get increasing capacity, particularly offshore, but also get an accurate and reasonable price for onshore measures as well, that will give us a much more sensible picture as to how economically viable these different measures are. And the spoiler alert is that they are really quite viable and increasingly so. And my comments on 2 about the kind of highly innovative technologies, which I would maybe 2 years ago have said, yes, let's really do that. At the moment, I would say, let's not get distracted by that. Let's get the basics done. Let's get them done now. Let's create some market space for private money to flow into there. Let's identify barriers that we can take away. But let's not use the new and shiny as an excuse not to focus on the basic measures that we really ought to have done a decade ago.
Thank you, Simon. That's 2, 3 and 4. I look forward to your 1, 5 and 6 as it's going. But now Becky.
I'm sure amongst our own networks we must all have some examples of businesses who have already actually sort of been on the energy efficiency saving journey. Is it possible to get some case studies from them? I know from representing chambers and the FSB and the we'll be able to come up with some, but I just think that sort of shared advice about what other businesses have done before, I think will be hugely helpful, because I think there's so many businesses who just do not know where to start. And then the other thing is, and this is out of region, but there's a campaign in Hull called the OES Net Zero campaign. And rather than, some companies are not able to give, £1,000, £100 sort of cost of living support. But what they've done is they've paid for companies to go into their employees' houses and do a kind of energy efficiency audit as a way of contributing to that help, rather than, being able to give them a £100 cash as such. And I think that's been a way of businesses investing in their own employees, but helping them sort of make some decisions about their own energy efficiency. I thought that might be interesting.
Thank you very much, Becky. As we just go into the last few comments on this item, can I go Councillor Pandor first, then Andrew, and then Councillor Hinchliffe?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. A lot of what's been said I agree with, and I think the questions are, we should be doing everything we can to actually get government to actually listen and do something. But what worries me is how much are we getting through to government? And one of the things that we might want to do is just put some kind of a case forward that if we don't get the support, because from my point of view, the market's failing, because no business can actually plan for what we're talking about. Especially if your company's profit is the same as your gas bills. Well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? You're gonna go out of business, and how can you plan for that? I'm sure there's other businesses that are actually in the same situation. So this really requires massive intervention from government, because somehow I get the feeling that they're saying, we've got a plan, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but they don't seem that urgency. Like with the pandemic, there was an urgency. Pandemic was a freak of nature. We managed to get through that. This is actually man-made. This is made by human beings. And if we can't solve this crisis, then God help us. So I'm sure we can get some analysis done, right? That if things don't pan out, this is the shape of the West Yorkshire economy. That could be. And if you look at other combined authorities, Midlands, North West, North East, and if you can actually then get a case put forward that actually, look, you know, you're going to completely ruin the economy, and you don't know how long this is going to last. You know, when you talk about 6 months, I can't see this ending in 6 months. I can only see it getting worse. You know, because there's so many factors right here that are out of anybody's control. You know, the Europe, it's on the brink of war. You know, they were talking yesterday on the news that will Putin press the button, and you know, will there be a nuclear strike? Liz Truss is on the record. You know, this is not a political point. She actually said that she wouldn't hesitate to actually press that button. So this is how our leaders, and again, it's not a political point, right? Yeah, thinking. So there's got to be some common sense. There's got to be some coherent cross-sector arguments that need to actually go to government and say, look, this is not a party political issue. This is an issue regarding our survival. This is an issue regarding survival of business, and you know, there's got to be a bit more than what they're putting across. But at the moment, I don't get any confidence. And again, not a political point. I get no confidence regarding how the government's going to react to this, because I think it's just going to go away. You know, it's not going to go away. You know, it needs some serious thinking behind this. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Andrew.
Yeah, my point really, I think, builds on what you're just saying there, Councillor Pandor. I agree with the points that have been made that our interventions as a local authority need to be in the rebiz kind of area, expanded for all the people who need it, and that does advance our green agenda. We've been on it for years. It is consistent and it is probably what we can do. So we just need to be seen to be doing that and do that as hard as we possibly can. With what happens next for longer term thinking, what I'm not hearing from central government at all, as we did hear in the pandemic, was, is there any support for people who really are going under? Because I do worry that there's some really quite good businesses which just, for the sake of getting through the next couple of years, you know, could be saved. And in the absence of any support for that kind of thing from central government, is that an area that we could think about as a CA, at least to have discussions and, you know, and potentially help people who, or help them with their thinking at least, who do look like that they just can't get through. So that'd be my thought as to a second kind of intervention we could make.
Thank you, Andrew. That's very helpful. Councillor Hinchcliffe. Helpful point and good clarification. So, I think, thank you.
Generally, I want to know the answer.
No.
What the combined authority think highly innovative technologies are to say we're not doing it anymore?
Then, as colleagues, do we have anyone who would be able to give an answer in this meeting? Liz.
Well, maybe it's to ask Simon in terms of I think your point was, let's make sure we do some of the basic stuff that we're not doing and do that well as do the innovative pieces. Is that, because I think is it just to clarify before I say what I think is innovative, because I think there were some things where we just haven't. There was some really basic stuff that we were trying to do when we were talking about rebiz, that when the team were telling me about things that you could just do, like moving your fridges away from windows. Some of these interventions are quite basic that we should just be doing. But there's then, as you rightly say, investment in the newer technologies and hydrogen, etc. We should also be. But maybe, Simon, it was your comment about what is innovative and not that you were thinking.
There is some subjectivities to what highly innovative means for me. I mean, I've been working with the hydrogen economy for the last decade, so it doesn't feel highly innovative. It just feels like something that's proving hard to roll out, but it might do to other people. So I absolutely take that point. For me, it's about the horizons, about the TRL, the technology readiness level, just how far away from deployability is it. And the comments that Liz made were right. I was not saying we should just stop them completely. It was more in terms of saying let's not prioritise those in favour of things that we could do in the here and now, and avoid actually implementing things that are closer to readiness levels. So for me, it's things that are kind of still in the lab or in very early stage test sort of levels would be considered highly innovative. I mean, hopefully private money will support those and they'll come through the system too. But there is a bit of a tendency to, delay action in the hope that, somebody's going to arrive with a silver bullet that will fix everything. And in so doing, ignoring the things that we could be doing more effectively in the here and now.
Important question. And Cameron, before I try to wrap this up.
It's a quick question. Are the guys from the Combined Authority seeing a slowdown in business startups as a result of this cost of living crisis?
Sorry, I'm going to have a cough as you come to me. Sorry about that. Yes, we are starting to see a bit of a slowdown, excuse me, and also a slight uptick in business failures. But nothing significant that would suggest sort of an underlying issue we need to be aware of. But there tends to be quite a lot of seasonal variation in those kind of metrics. But until recently, and certainly after recovery from the pandemic, we saw business rates and business failures start to improve. So there are a number of reasons that affect that. I don't think we're seeing anything at the moment that suggests that. But I do take Andrew's point that we are seeing. This is an unusual set of circumstances we're seeing. The kind of market failure that's implied by the government's package of intervention is fairly unique. Traditional government orthodoxy has been that businesses come and go, but actually there's a lot of this is a set of unique circumstances. I think even if you wind back to the discussion at the Economic Scrutiny Committee meeting this morning around how it compared with the 70s, and it's actually very, very different to the 70s. The structural factors are completely different. And anything we can do to support businesses that otherwise are viable, I think is really, really important too. I hope that's an answer.
Right, thank you all, and thank you very much again to Patrick and Phil and all of the officers to help facilitate, and also for everyone's contributions. This is a live and increasingly important issue for all of the businesses, and I feel like we need to draw the helpful inputs that we have sort of been provided today together and allow people to continue to build on this in advance of that timeline that I shared earlier. So what I propose is that we circulate the discussion points from this section of the agenda quickly in advance of the minutes, give our board members the further opportunity to input and hopefully take alongside Becky any follow-up that comes from the regional meeting of the CBI and others this morning. Then we have on the 13th of October a session with our mayor and our business rep groups where I think the economic update situation and our approach to that would be a very helpful discussion before our combined authority meeting on the 21st. And I think there we need to do, as we've sort of been saying throughout this, these are the things that are in our control that we can do. I think focused on helping our businesses in the long term and adapt rather than simply pay bills. Plus, our request and our ask of national government for the support that the businesses in our region need and articulate the impact that it is having here and elsewhere. So that's my proposed course of action. I want to thank everyone for their conversations and that we sort of note the points formally and move on to our next item, which is continued on the economy, but our economic strategy, item number 7. So, if we move to item number 7, this paper is to ask whether we need a future economic strategy, and if so, how we create a longer-term economic strategy for West Yorkshire. The last time we had something like this, I have managed to dig out from the archives, which was our Strategic Economic Plan 2014 to 2019. Following this, we have had a series of events, including Brexit, pandemics, wars, cost of living crisis, which has meant that we have had lots of approaches and lots of but nothing perhaps unifying as an economic strategy. And I think it's important to note we do have lots of strategies relating to this area as a combined authority level. Also, each local authority has an economic strategy, and therefore, my natural instinct is a bit cynical of do we need a new strategy? But I think, reviewing this in detail, I think we have a gap, and I'm going to try to articulate why I think we have a gap, and then I'll sort of pass on to open this up for a discussion. I think firstly we do have a lot of strategies already, and some of the structural challenges and the opportunities, they haven't changed. But I think much has changed. So our demographics of our workforce has changed since this was published. Working from home as a prevalence has changed significantly since this was published. The rising cost of living and energy crisis that we've talked about, skills shortages, especially by sector, and also our net zero commitments and plans have evolved rapidly since then. I think we also have some gaps in our work, which was this in particular on sectors. I think we started some work on sectors, but we never actually, to my knowledge, finished the work on sectors. And I think why this is relevant now is because we have a lot of programs that are going through our various assurance processes for gain share funding, also for UK shared prosperity funding. And I think we need to test these programs and also our entire pipeline against some future scenarios. So the approach in the paper, which I will assume people have read, is to review the existing strategies and try to consolidate them, to fill some identified gaps that we know that we have, such as the sectoral approach that we've talked about, and then to help with some scenario planning, trying to answer the question of what might the world look like in 2030 and beyond. And I think as I've been discussing this with officers, my analogy for what we need is the lighthouse that helps us sort of guide the way when we're having different discussions to this is where we're trying to get to in 2030 and beyond. We don't want to write a specification document for the lighthouse, and we don't want long and lengthy Word documents underpinning necessarily the strategy. But I think we do need that simple approach so we can all use it and all share it. And all use it to inform our discussion making. So I would very much welcome sort of board views on this, but perhaps first I pass to Liz to see if there's anything else you'd like to highlight.
Thank you. I think you covered it very comprehensively. But we're happy to kind of take questions on it. I think particularly we've talked a bit this morning already about sectors, and I think that is one of the aims that I think, as you said, is one of the areas that we'd like to particularly do some more work in. I'm happy to take views on that, but happy to have questions rather than add some more.
Thank you, Liz. And can I pass to Andrew then first?
Yeah, I'd just like to really endorse the importance of this, and really by going back to that 2014 document that you're showing there, which Simon and I were around when it was launched, I think, and over the last eight or whatever years, we have continually referred to it. I mean, I'm sure everybody remembers the 1 + 2 = 5 or whatever. That was the genesis of that. And I think if we've got a document that we can kick off again now that allows us to refer to what we're doing over a longer period, it has two really beneficial effects. One is I think it galvanises the people around this table and our articulation of why what we're doing is useful and good in a way that people outside the room can really understand and see that what we've done is good. And then the second thing is that it also helps us to articulate when we're asking for money next time round as to why we're worth giving money to. And I was very happy to hear that we felt we did very well with the gain share discussion and that we got more than we might have done because we've got good relationships and because we can demonstrate a good game having been played. So I think maybe the real true significance of this plan should be that we create something that allows us to demonstrate why we're good. And that's good for morale and good for getting more money.
Thank you, Andrew. Simon.
So yeah, I would also endorse it for similar reasons. I've got, I think, 3 additional thoughts on this. One is that the absence of an economic strategy, the optics that presents externally could be quite damaging actually, because even though we know in this room and other colleagues elsewhere will know that there are multiple strategies addressing sensible economic geographies, the absence of something that relates to the LEP boundaries wouldn't necessarily look great when somebody came in to try and find out more about the region or wanted the confidence that we knew what we were doing going forwards. Your point about being the lighthouse setting, the frame of reference within which other decisions are made, I think that's a very important one. And so in terms of the steps that are being suggested, I think it's implied, but I just wanted to check that we'd also build in a kind of almost like a gap test or just check for any contradictions with the other commitments that we've made. So make sure there's nothing in the economic strategy that contradicts our inclusive growth, yes, that's in there, but also just transition, some of the decarbonisation, climate resilience commitments that have been made elsewhere. So just ensure that we can make sure that there are no contradictory pieces within that, and also do it in a way that keeps it I mean, the fluidity and turbulence of the world that we've lived through since that one was released is evidence enough that we need to keep it. We need to keep it fairly malleable at best in order to keep it valid for a reasonable length of time.
Thank you, Sam and Andrew. And can I just point out how helpful it is to have that experience of developing and using an economic strategy on the board. So I appreciate your comments there. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Our neighbours in North Yorkshire now have a devolved plan coming forward, which they're going to be, is it 2023? They get elections in 23, do they? 2024. So obviously this is a Leeds City region, isn't it? Are we doing it with North Yorkshire, or is it just West Yorkshire, or what geography are we doing this economic strategy over? Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. On your first point, I entirely agree. We've done a lot of consultation. I think we need to bring that together. And just to, I think, reassure on the timeline for that point, we have a LEP board on the 1st of December that I think we could bring something to and ideally then formally approve in March. So this would be at pace. We also have the benefit of a private sector member event on the 7th of November that would give us an opportunity to get a lot of input from the private sector without hopefully duplicating consultations. I will give my answer to the second question and offer. Let's test. So I think the geography has got to be for our West Yorkshire geography, but it absolutely has to be consistent with North Yorkshire and other adjacent areas. I've been speaking to Helen Simpson, the chair of North Yorks, and I'm actually attending their LEP conference in October and trying to dovetail our two economic strategies as we are, so close neighbours and don't have political boundaries from a business perspective, between them. And I think it's really important that we get that right. So that's my answer, and that is our answer. That's helpful.
I think our economic geography is obviously beyond the bounds of West Yorkshire, but our ability to make the changes that I think we want this document to be able to make we need to be focused on what we can do within West Yorkshire. So the geography, I think, is exactly as Mark said, West Yorkshire, but with a understanding and acknowledgement of the wider, and it's not just North Yorkshire, but our economy is also reliant on working well with our neighbours.
Okay.
With that,
Thank you.
I'd just encourage us to work cross-boundary, basically, and obviously there is going to be a new mayor in North Yorkshire and York, and obviously York is usually around this table, so we just need to work together.
Thank you. I think we've just got two more people to come in, Becky and then Amir. I'm so sorry, Councillor Lynn. Councillor Lynn. Are you sure? Okay, Becky, Amir, Councillor Lynn.
I think from a business representative organisation point of view, really supportive of the sector approach. I think a lot of the professional services are also sort of rejigging their businesses by from a sectoral point of view, whereas they were more on sort of levels of income, levels of turnover, and then being really clear about what success looks like. And just taking on board that sort of, that disparities in income levels in the region and making sure that, that economic strategy tries to narrow those as much as possible.
I would just say that businesses don't recognise those. It's geographic distances and other conurbations that matter to them. And so I think that when we're looking at other cities around the world, especially in India and places like that, where you have cities with 10 million people, when we go over and we start offering them what might be our geographic area or so on, it's literally like a village by comparison. And I think that the importance of connecting up with a broader mass, and whether we can control them or not, I think is a different matter, but piggybacking on their presence within our sphere of influence, I think is really important when we're speaking at a business level.
Thank you, I entirely agree. Councillor Lynn.
Yeah, sure. Well, showing my age here, I can also remember the 2014. I've been involved in the 2014 strategy and everything, and all the workshops and everything that went into that. And so I'd actually echo what Susan said, what Councillor Hinchcliffe said, that let's not reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of stuff that was in there that probably can be incorporated into this. And I'm actually very conscious that there's always an opportunity cost. This is one of the points that officers from Calderdale reminded me about, that actually they're increasingly needing to put demands and asks to combined authority officers about work that we could do with help with in terms of supporting the cost of living impact on our local residents and businesses, what's happening, as I mentioned earlier, to the voluntary and community sector with the cliff edge of the European funding and all the rest of it. Now, if we're getting back the comments that, well, actually we ain't got the time to do it because we're really sorry we're focused on this, I kind of have got a little bit of a problem about that. So that's just one thing I'd like to say. I think, and then the other point is that I think that the emphasis has very definitely got to be on, as Simon was saying, really on ramping up. What are we doing in terms of net zero, but also in particular inclusive growth because of the impact of the cost of living crisis on our neighbourhoods and our communities. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lynn, and I think points well made. Phil, did you want to respond on the officer?
Yeah, and it was your point was fairly aligned to Councillor Hinchcliffe's point around how we do this strategy, and I've been involved in many of these in Bradford and the combined authority area before, and we've got a lot of material we can use and repurpose, but we've got to bring it into the geography we've got now and the circumstances we've got now. So our entire design of how we want to do this is we want to do this in the simplest and easiest way we possibly can, minimising the time of your officers, but getting really good quality input, which is why, as Mark suggested, we want to have a really kind of strong session at that LEP Away Day at the beginning of November, when we are, if this committee wants to go forward with this, we're going to work with PERN, our academic partners, to present a series of scenarios we can talk about to frame that discussion, and we can use that to take it away and then produce it. And we've already done, Becky, some thinking about sectors and how that works and brought that up to date too, so we can have that discussion separately or as part of that as well. So we just want to keep it, and your officers have been very open about some of their challenges in terms of how they're spread on this, and we want to work really collaboratively with them, and they understand the pressures that they face as well as us.
Thank you, Phil, and hugely helpful comments there, colleagues, on that. So the recommendation is to follow that approach, which is a more light touch lighthouse, building on the existing work with the timelines that we've said. So I'm seeing nods, but formally asking if we can move that and agree to those recommendations based on the comments that we've made. And I'm seeing nods. Thank you very much. Okay, we've intentionally allowed more time on the economic update than was scheduled in the agenda, and I make no apologies for that because it is the main item. We now come to our committee update report, which was included in the board pack, and I would like to move that we treat the paper as read and we treat exception, items just by exception rather than run through it. So I will still offer updates from the different committees. So starting with you, anything by exception, Andrew, on business, economy and innovation?
Yeah, just to say that we had new members. It's already been referred to with Asma doing our. She was one of the people that we interviewed, so I'm really delighted that she's getting involved in this already. So that's good. We've got some really great new members, and it's good to see that coming through. We spent some time on the growth service, which remains very important. So just keep that, just mention the fact that the growth service is still one of the most important things we do. Spends lots of our money. There are 20, 25 people involved in it. It's a huge deal, and the big panel does spend a good amount of time thinking about how they do what they do. And I'm sure they will be part of the solution to whatever we do with the cost of living crisis, because they're the people on the ground. So just reminding you that that's there. The main thing, though, I wanted to just trail. I think I did trail it probably at our last meeting, but it's happened now. We've launched the manufacturing task force recommendations to Tracy Brabin. She was involved in the launch. It was a good day, and I think with Phil we're going to be giving some more airtime to that during the autumn, and we'll find ways, and you'll probably hear more about it. And I hope perhaps some of you in this room can help us do some more publicity around that. The key points that have come out of the manufacturing task force are renewing the commitment to improving productivity, which has been a theme for forever, really, but it still remains the most important. We're still behind as a region. We still need to focus on it. And the Manufacturing Task Force was seriously endorsing that, remembering that we're going to be doing a new round of Made Smarter and digitisation, so that's good. But there's more that we need to do. We've also, as part of it, it's being announced that the manufacturing associations from the different districts of West Yorkshire are getting together under one person and will speak as one voice for manufacturing, and that there'll be somebody alongside Tracy who talks about manufacturing. So this is all about positioning manufacturing as one of the most important things that the region does. The task force also has endorsed advice on greening businesses and the need for the local authority to be able to provide proper advice on how to achieve net zero. That's very much in line with everything we've been saying today, so you'll be pleased to hear that that's there. There was a big endorsement of the place work that's done in the region, making sure that we're seen as the most attractive place to come and build manufacturing businesses, bring business in. We've already got more manufacturing business than any of the other regions in the UK. It's maybe not spoken of enough, that that's a proud boast that we have already, and that it's something that we need to press up. And then the last bit, which I think is very dear to my heart, and I think most people in the room would also endorse it as a clear importance, is the importance of getting more young people involved in manufacturing, showing that the apprenticeships that we offer and the other ways into manufacturing that we offer in the region are amongst the best, maybe the best in the UK, and that the quality of apprenticeship training in the region is second to none, and something that is more in the minds of more of our young people. So those are the Manufacturing Task Force bits. So as I say, hopefully you'll be able to help us publicise that through the balance of the year. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was innovation. You will recall that the £6 million were put aside for innovation using gain share money over a 3-year period, and that there was a third stream there which was about individual or small numbers of entrepreneurs, almost individual entrepreneurs really, who've got a societal changing idea and offering them 100 hours of support through working with other of our famous and effective entrepreneurs in the region. That was put out to tender, and as we referred to right at the beginning, Cameron and I have been involved in that, and that has now been awarded, that tender, to a group based at Nexus. And it's a fantastic scheme. It's going to be really, really good, and it involves all of the districts at district level, and it's going to be an exciting scheme. So hopefully we can do a bit more time on that once there's more to say on that, Mark. But if we could earmark maybe some time early next year to highlight that in this group. Okay, thanks.
We shall, Andrew. Thank you for that really positive update. Climate Committee in Councillor Swift's absence. It was a while ago since we met on the 19th of July. There were 2 substantive points. One, to talk about the carbon impact assessment, which is a really important piece of work, and there's a lot more information that board members can get into on that. And 2, really to focus on the priority Wave 1 projects that are now moving through the Combined Authority Assurance process that will be moving to Climate Committee, I think the week after next, and then the Combined Authority on the 21st of October. Helen, can I come to you for culture?
It takes us to the largest committee now. The second thing just to say really is that Phil at the meeting gave a report on the Creative Catalyst programme, which is now in delivery and including the Creative Accelerator and Export Lab strands, and it's engaging 56 businesses. And additionally, the Mayor's Screen Diversity programme, which is at Screen Yorkshire, and is around young people having experience in the screen industry, has far exceeded its targets and has gone really, really well. I won't touch upon the framework now because I think that's the next agenda item.
Super. Thank you, Helen. Similarly, for employment and skills, possibly the most substantive item was the digital skills plan, which is coming as the next point on the agenda. So that was the sort of only by exception update. Amir, anything by exception on the place?
Yeah, just a couple of points. We've also had some new recruits, and again, really, really high quality private sector people with a lot of local experience around sort of the built environment. So I think they're really strong additions. The the State of the Region report was really interesting because we're getting updates on that, which is due out in September on a whole series. I think there's 40 different indices on that. And just as a headline, there's things like life expectancy, number of new dwellings, and building energy efficiency and fuel poverty, where West Yorkshire is performing worse than the rest of the UK. And then there's other things around housing affordability, gigabit capable internet and super fast broadband and also mobile coverage, where we're actually performing better than the rest of the UK. So it's really interesting to see sort of where the area is performing on. And then just finally, the Brownfield Housing Fund is progressing a number of projects through, which is really interesting. I think the view really was around how we can leverage that investment and those new types of benchmark buildings or residential offers within towns and places in the area to then further direct private sector investment by creating new benchmarks in values and so on. There's also a very acute issue with construction inflation and the impact that that's going to have on the delivery of these projects. So I think that's one to watch, but I think that there's the opportunity to use that money in a way to leverage further private sector impact on the back of it.
Thank you, Amir. And last but by no means least, Councillor Hinchcliffe on transport.
There's quite a lot happened on transport actually since this was written, but just the main thing really is the mayor's fares stuff. So £2 single fare, £4.50 cap fare. That's obviously subject to inflation next year, but is all about trying to increase patronage on the buses, and also we're trying to prioritise the bus corridors, segregated bus corridors and CRSTS, and it is all about trying to make sure that the bus network is more viable in the long term, and there's a lot of work and investment needs to go in to make that happen.
Thank you, Councillor Hinchcliffe, and everyone. Sorry, Susan, if you could just pop your microphone. Thank you. Great. Okay, so thank you for that. Moving to item 10 on the agenda is the cultural framework. We're being asked to note the developments and to comment and feedback, particularly on, I think, theme 4 for business, possibly also theme 3 on skills, and then promote the cultural framework widely through networks. So Helen, can I pass to you?
Yes, so because the Culture, Heritage and Sports Committee is a new committee, it obviously needs a framework to guide and shape how to allocate funding. And so we have held a number of consultation events which are detailed in the papers. I went to 2 of those. One was really well attended at the stadium in Huddersfield, and another one in Wakefield, where we had a real cross-sector of people and community groups from right across the kind of culture, sport and heritage sectors. And we discussed a lot of the themes and kind of shaped those further, and that's gone out to public consultation, which is online, so members are encouraged to go online. That has been extended to the 25th of September, and so there's a bit more time to do that. And then obviously that will be shaped further from those comments, and will go to the combined authority before being finalised as well. As Mark said, it would be great to get your comments in particular on skills and business, although obviously you are people in a place, so it would be good to get your thoughts just from a personal perspective on those as well.
Thank you, Helen. So opening out to our board, Amit.
Yeah, just a couple of points. So just on that question, I was just going to make a point around some of the big tech companies like Google and others that are doing free courses which allow people to also almost go through an isometric testing process. At the end of it, they can essentially start to identify skills that people have, innate skills, that they might not be reflected in their qualifications. And these are people that are then going into tech-related industries without having any qualifications, from really obscure backgrounds, and literally landing jobs that are starting at $73,000 apparently. So I think that there's a real interest in sort of looking at what those skills, because they're all free, various companies are doing them, and how might that be an avenue for people who wouldn't go through the formal qualification process, but actually still find that they've got really powerful sort of things that they can define on a CV. So that was one thing. The other thing was just around cultural strategy, and I mean, we've spoken before about sort of
And one of the things that I think is really important to see is when you start mapping activities that are taking place within an area. And so, for example, if we look at LS6, we might find that there's 6,000 activities take place over 2 months, but only 20% of them are free, and most of them are starting at 6 o'clock in the evening, and they might only be covering a certain type of sort of sector like sport. If we look at Bradford City Centre, we find there's actually only 1,800 over the same period, but 65% of them are free. So when we start looking at what those exclusions are, and also who on the ground is already doing things, we can then start to leverage the things that are there and how we can start supporting that asset-based regeneration. So those are just 2 points.
Thank you, Amir. Looking for other contributions to this paper? Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, well, Bradford is, as we all know, is very excited about the future when it comes to culture and creative industries. Obviously, this is quite a comprehensive strategy, and I'm just wondering, does this signal then that the Combined Authority is now going to start funding, sport and parks? It's obviously it's in here saying that that's what they're going to do. So obviously, we welcome that investment if that's coming our way.
I think we tend to Phil for this
one. Obviously, the report's out for consultation and we'll go to the Combined Authority. Obviously, we expanded the scope to include sports, so the committee includes culture and sport. We have a envelope at the moment, which is the amount assigned to this investment priority. So we'll need to prioritise and decide how we organise our resources in that envelope.
Thank you for providing clarity, Phil. Okay, Helen, thank you. Can I ask maybe if you would like board members to sort of circulate this to our networks, could you possibly provide us a helpful reminder or something to sort of share on social media or email channels? And I'm sure board members will continue to do that. If there are no further points, I will move us on to item 11. Which is a digital update. And this is doing two, I think, distinct things. Firstly, we're talking about the digital skills plan as trailed in the committee update report and seeking endorsement of that. And I think that the papers in the pack, for me, certainly were a great reminder of just how much we have done in the last couple of years. And that the fact that we have the fastest growing digital sector outside London is something that we should all be incredibly proud of. And then the second thing is really seeking views of broadening this approach from skills to also include place and business, and possibly leading to a deep dive in the world of digital from this board. And to lead us through that, Andrew, can I pass to you, please?
Sort of standing in from Andy Ridyard on this one, and I appreciate your support as well, Liz, in terms of what we're saying about it. So I think really what we're wanting from today, from this group, is endorsement of the idea that digital is incredibly important and needs to be one of our priorities. It's difficult, isn't it, because everything's a priority, but I think we're trying to say this is the priority of priorities. The way we've expressed it previously in the past is we've said that it's a cross-cutting theme that goes through everything that we're doing, so that begins to suggest that, it's somehow fundamental, isn't it? So if anyone really doesn't think that and thinks that, some of the other things that we could prioritise are more important than digital, it would kind of be good to hear that, really. But if we are thinking that digital's the thing, then, then let's really find the energy that's implied by that. Today we're asking for approval of a couple of documents that are in the pack. The Digital Skills Plan, which is really documenting the work that was done by the Local Digital Skills Partnership, which Mandy's been leading over the last year or two. And it documents a lot of great interventions and great stuff that's already being done, and also talks about plans for the future, about how we will particularly upskill the people of the region, creating a fully inclusive society and a thriving economy through the growth of digital skills for all. So it's pretty ambitious, really. But given what we're saying about the importance of digital and its kind of gateway positioning in life, that if you can't do the digital, there's all sorts of things that you can't do, and that's kind of why we're saying it's so important, isn't it? So asking for endorsement on the digital skills plan. And then secondly, the idea of doing redoing the digital framework that was done in 2019. So this is suggesting that we put a bit of work into refreshing the picture that was created of the digital landscape in our region in 2019, diving back into it, perhaps looking again at where our areas of significant strength are, and where there's places that we can leverage the ecosystem to create maximum benefits for people. So it's about saying, okay, you know, this is a very important feature of our region, the fact that we're good at digital. Where can we really intervene and big up the things that are already good? And it was nice to hear that this seems to be an area where we're probably ahead of Manchester. So, you know, I just think in terms of motivating us and having a good story to tell, you know, this isn't about, you know, trying to be as good as someone else. This is saying, actually, we're already amongst the very best at this. And this is our opportunity to really forge ahead and be absolutely preeminent in terms of this, in terms of the North. And there are some measures that are incorporated in terms of what we're aiming for, in terms of where we can get people's skill levels up to, which would show that we are, by 2025, achieving that aspiration to be amongst the best places anywhere in the UK at this. The last thing, which is, so please endorse that, if you would, the idea of refreshing the digital framework. And for discussion, really, and this is the bit that we wanted to discuss today a little bit, is that as well as focusing on skills, which we believe that we've done pretty well through the LDSP to this point, broadening out that work to look a little bit at place and infrastructure, broadband connectivity, smart cities, 5G, that kind of thing, all about making us able to realise our ambition to be the best. Do we want to include that in terms of what the remit for the local authority is? I would say yes. And then the other point is this idea of really focusing on the businesses that we've got, and it's a sectoral approach again, actually, and getting much more articulate about why our sector in this area is particularly good and how we can make it even better and focus the education and the other things that we're doing on it in the most effective way. Mark's taking a personal interest in this, and as his suggestion, I think we may do a deep dive probably later in the autumn and spend some more time on this. And I guess if we did that, Mark, then we'd bring the thoughts that would come out of that back to this group.
That's great, Andrew. And I think I speak from having a background in a digitally native business, and I certainly see there are many things in what has been labelled a digital world, but actually refers to everything from smart manufacturing, 3D printing, AI, and basic digital infrastructure all coming together, and potentially raising up to what is an industrial revolution 4.0 in the next few years. We've got technologies that are becoming more famous and in the public domain now, starting to come together. And I think it's really important. Personally, I think that the work on skills and the digital skills plan is excellent. And I think, you know, having metrics that we sort of show that this region as West Yorkshire is, you know, significantly performing well ahead of Manchester, near London. I think for people who are looking to invest in our region, that's exceptionally helpful data and information, but we need to build on that. And we can only build on that by treating this topic as more than just skills and incorporating the place-based approach and the business-based approach together. I don't think that a deep dive needs to tie up lots of resources and strategy. We had a previous digital board that I think we were both members of that through the pandemic has met less frequently, but there's a lot of people within the private sector community that would be willing to do some heavier lifting on this and pull something together, and a few of them are really willing to give their time to do this and to support the team. So if we have that offer, I suggest we endorse that approach and try to bring this together to a future LEP board meeting. But I'm obviously open to the views of other board members around the table. Or happy to also just have strong nods and thumbs up. Sorry, Simon and then Becky.
I agree with almost everything Andrew said, apart from it's the be-all and end-all, because other things are important too. But it is very important. So with that one caveat, I would agree with you.
Yeah, I think very, very supportive. Few things. What more can we learn from London? You know, in that sort of sense, and you know, how do you get even closer to them. It really interesting, the list on 2.11. What are we most proud of? What would we really like to improve? I think that would be really good to sort of explore. And actually do think the whole cultural and digital skills piece are really interrelated. So those whether they're tourist attractions, whether they're heritage sites that have really embraced digital as part of their content, you're seeing the numbers of visitors actually being much more engaged than those that haven't. And then back to the sort of inclusive growth piece, how can we make sure that everybody is involved with that? That there will always be people who just are still very scared of digital and I think just taking that on board. But I think it's a really exciting area that certainly from what I hear from other regions and my other colleagues around the country, it should be something that we really, really want to drive forwards.
Thank you, Becky. I know from working with the team that the points you've raised are very much front and centre in mind. So, Councillor Hinchcliffe.
And do you have any idea how much it'll cost to deliver in terms of the action plan round to what's the budget for delivering this?
I don't think we're making a budget request, but Liz, could I pass to you for any resource implication?
So we're obviously developing up this as an action plan. So particularly slide or page 88 has some of the headline interventions. So what we're hoping for from the skills plan is that there are a number of things that fall out of this that are tangible programmes. And as part of the work that we're doing with the Employment and Skills Committee, we're thinking about how this fits with the allocations that we've got for gain share, and also we have the Shared Prosperity Fund in later years. So this is not a funding request to the LEP Board today, because we think if you all think this is an important area, then it would fit within the investment priorities that have been set for gain share.
So to answer the question a little bit even more directly than that, I mean, what Liz is talking about is a package of measures, and we have to decide on the individual measures, but we're thinking somewhere in the ballpark of a range between 4 to 6 million, depending on what we're doing. But we're thinking about programming that in the initiatives that Liz outlined around gain share and SPF. So we're already kind of programming that at the moment, but it depends on what we decide to do and how we flesh out the business cases for those initiatives. But that's the ballpark.
Can I just add, as well as the specific things that are in here, this is also a really key theme that we see through what will come, the successor to the employment hub. So we think digital and green, just to maybe to Simon's point, are the two areas in terms of skills that we want to be pushing through our usual channels, as well as these things that are over and above that. Is that fair, Phil?
It is completely fair. And just another point, I mean, I've obviously answered that direct question quite directly, but this is clearly a partnership strategy, and what's successful about some of the regions that are mentioned here is there's a kind of private public sector kind of partnership on this, and different players kind of contribute in different ways. So what I was referring to is our contribution, and we're hoping to leverage wider contributions as a result of that contribution.
Thank you both. Peter, can I bring you in as our senior sponsor here?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is really interesting, and I think you can see why it's been a cross-cutting theme, because it is so broad. And I think, maybe underlying Councillor Hinchcliffe's question is if we're doing everything, how can we afford to do it? How can we afford to do everything, and have we got the capacity to do it? Not just the kind of programme money. So I think that some of the areas where these inputs are most powerful are the sort of taxonomies, which sort of clarify the sort of divide and conquer bits. The specialist, on skills, for example, the specialist skills, the skills businesses, or every business needs, or most businesses needs, and the basic skills for employability. The definitions of the essential digital skills for individuals, and some of the material on slide 39. I think where we can merge those taxonomies to kind of create kind of personas and user journeys, as we start to do in slide 39, is really powerful, particularly where you can link the needs of employers with the aspirations and needs of individuals. I think there's lots of really good stuff here on focusing on digital skills. I think just one thing is that in this area, I think Amir referred to this in passing earlier on, is that it's quite difficult to map digital skills onto qualification levels. So I think for young people, yes, the fact that fewer than 10% have a key stage 4 qualification in computing is kind of one fact. But it doesn't mean that the other 90% are digitally illiterate by any means, or that they can't become digital specialists. And I think because the learning and the packages are changing and developing all the time, and quite a lot of them are free, and they're not all necessarily embodied in publicly recognised qualifications. We shouldn't be too mechanistic about where you have to do this in order to gain this skill and move from level A to level B. So I think this is really big. I think yes, but don't lose the focus on skills. There's lots of really good analysis and conceptualisation in here. It's the kind of the next step is the kind of the prioritisation of the plans. Really good, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So the specific ask for us today is that we approve the digital skills plan before it goes to the Combined Authority Committee, that we offer feedback, which we have just done, and that we agree to the proposal to refresh the digital framework and host the wider private sector sort of deep dive, sort of led by this board, into digital beyond skills. But based on those recommendations, can I seek endorsement and nods? And everyone happy? Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so that is the sort of last full agenda item in our public session. We still have item 12 to come and do. Just before I sort of wrap up the public meeting, just want to draw people's attention to the 2 sets of minutes of the Combined Authority in the pack, and also the date of the next meeting on the 1st of December, and just offer an opportunity for a very brief any other business before we close the live streaming and go into public private session. Sorry, Simon.
It will be brief. I just wanted to update colleagues briefly as to the progress that's been made in the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. I've spoken about that previously in this group, and since the last update, we've received some new funding, some very generous funding from both Leeds University and from other sources that has allowed the recruitment of 4 additional full-time equivalent staff. So we've got some real momentum building now, and we're going to be looking at some almost deeper dive workshops and sessions to look at practical measures around some of the key interventions that we're looking to bring forward. So there'll be quite a lot on the Commission website about that, and I'm just really seeking to encourage anybody who wants to participate to do that, and also use your networks and your sort of the people that you know, which go into all manner of diverse and interesting places across the regional economy, to encourage other people to get involved. We're trying to be as open, inclusive and transparent as possible, so take a look at what's going on via the Commission website, but things are beginning to move more quickly now. We've got more resource. That's it. That's as quick as I can make it.
Thank you, Simon. Very helpful, very quick. So if there is nothing else, then if we can sort of close the public meeting, and can we confirm that we have any live streaming on?